Friends, there's this reading from the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna is speaking. Men say that the Ashwatta, the eternal sacred tree, grows with its roots above and its branches below, and the leaves of which are the Vedas. He who knows this knows the Vedas. Its branches growing out of the three qualities, with the objects of sense as the lesser shoots, spread forth, some above and some below. And those roots which ramify below in the regions of mankind are the connecting bonds of action. Its form is not thus understood by men. It has no beginning, nor can its present constitution be understood, nor has it any end. When one hath hewn down with the strong axe of dispassion this Ashwatta tree with its deeply embedded roots, then that place is to be sought after from which those who there take refuge never more return to rebirth. For it is the primeval spirit from which floweth the never-ending stream of conditioned existence. Those who are free from pride of self and whose discrimination is perfected, who have prevailed over the fault of attachment to action, who are constantly employed in devotion to meditation upon the Supreme Spirit, who have renounced desire and are free from the influence of the opposites, known as pleasure and pain, are undiluted and proceed to that place which endureth forever. Neither the sun, nor the moon, nor the fire enlighteneth that place. From it there is no return. It is my supreme abode. And now the talk on the Ashwatta tree.
Thank you, Kathy. Let me just share my slides. Can you see the slides?
Yes.
Thank you. Good morning, friends, and welcome to this short talk on Ashwatta Tree. In every tradition that studies eternal wisdom, the image of the tree recurs as both a symbol and a cosmogram of existence. The Bhagavad Gita designates this cosmic tree as Ashwatta or Aswatha, the sacred fig whose roots stretch upward and whose branches descend into manifestation. In the Theosophical interpretation, this image is regarded as a precise emblem of the duality of spirit and matter. The tree points simultaneously to evolution and involution, the descent of consciousness into form and its re-ascent through self-knowledge. In the Theosophical movement of 2022 issue, describes a dual nature with precision. It says that a tree is a botanical fact as well as a mythological symbol, but only a true philosopher is able to read the symbol of the tree, for a tree of life is also the tree of knowledge. This statement captures the essence of Theosophical symbolism, the bridging of objectivity and inner revelation. The Ashwatta is not simply vegetation standing in for spirit, rather it is a living hieroglyph or symbol of the universal structure, an emblem whose branches are words and whose sap is consciousness itself. In Mr. Judge's notes on the Gita, the same vision is echoed through the language of metaphysical process. And Mr. Judge says that the universe is a vast organism ever manifesting through countless beings, in which the tree of life and the tree of knowledge are but two aspects of the eternal process. This metaphor points to the perennial teaching of unity and diversity. The macrocosmic Ashwatta and the microcosmic human being are reflections of one another. The upward trending root is also called the Prakriti, the spiritual energy that sustains all life. And the downward trending branches are the multiplicity of worlds and forms through which the same energy expresses itself. And therefore, to meditate upon the Ashwatta is to contemplate the entire scheme of manifestation. Its leaves are doctrines, its branches the planes of beings, its roots the immortal source that nourishes all. For a student of Theosophy, this contemplation transforms abstract metaphysics into a realization that every atom and every thought partakes of one universal life. In that recognition, philosophy ceases to be speculation and becomes living wisdom, also known as vidya, that flowers in compassion. The theosophical understanding of Ashwatta is therefore not merely descriptive, but in one way also a form of initiation. It invites the aspirant to ascend the inner tree of consciousness, moving from the shadows of multiplicity towards the light of the rootless root. So let's look at the etymology of this word. So the very word Aswatha reveals the mystery it symbolizes. Swa means tomorrow, and Shtha means to stand. And when the two are connected by the compound yields that which will not stand tomorrow, pointing to the transient, ever-changing nature of conditioned existence. Thus, at the level of etymology, the tree itself becomes a lesson in impermanence. The Ashwatha is the tree of ceaseless becoming. Its leaves are the flickering forms of life. Its sap the current of the great breath that animates the worlds. We are taught that the Ashwatha means that which will not remain the same till tomorrow, and it thus symbolizes the ever-changing phenomenal world. Yet the roots of this tree are above in the changeless reality, while the branches spread below in the realm of change. What we perceive is only the reflection of the real tree standing in heaven. Here the metaphysical paradox is clearly drawn, and by that the invisible roots of spirit sustain the visible forms of matter. The inversion, roots above, branches below, reverses the ordinary view of growth. It suggests that the world of our senses is a mirror image, a downward projection of a higher prototype. And as the Gita declares, the roots are above and its branches below. Its leaves are the hymns of the Veda, and he who knows this tree knows the Vedas. And if we read this from the theosophical standpoint, this inversion is not just a theoretical or fanciful allegory, but an exact statement of correspondence between the noumenal and the phenomenal world. The term above in the preceding statement designates not a place, but a state of consciousness, also known as Para-Prakriti, the unmanifest potential. The word below, signifies Apara-Prakriti, the differentiated world of action. Between them stretches the trunk of Manas, the human mind, mediating spirit and matter. And the image therefore fuses both the higher cosmology and the psychology. The same structure that underlies the universe repeats itself within the individual as a ladder of consciousness. Judge notes that this inversion mirrors the condition of the soul in manifestation. He says, the roots being above means that the spiritual origin of man is on high, and that all the powers which he uses flow downwards and outwards from the immortal source. So the task of leading a spiritual life then is to reverse the direction of our attention, to turn consciousness back towards its own root. And when the aspirant contemplates the Ashwatha in meditation, he symbolically climbs the tree in the opposite direction of the sap, retracing the path of descent until he reaches the unconditioned source from which the flow began. And this is why the Gita also adds by saying, Krishna saying, quote, with the strong axe of detachment, cut down this firmly rooted Ashwatta. Then seek that place from which those who have gone never return. Therefore, what we see in the etymology of the world contains a whole philosophy of renunciation. That which, quote unquote, will not stand tomorrow cannot be grasped today. To cling to the transient is to dwell among the leaves and branches. To know the root is to know immortality. In its simplest form, the term Aswatha instructs a pilgrim, all that is seen will pass. Seek the unseen that endures. The manifested cosmos, like the reflected tree on the surface of a lake, changes from moment to moment. But a tree whose image it is remains unmoved in the silent heights of the spirit. The image of the inverted Ashwatha presents not merely a cosmic map, but also a reflection of the human constitution. The Gita declares that its roots are above, signifying that all source of manifestation is invisible and spiritual, while its branches spread below, denoting the visible universe of effects. It can also be understood in the light of the sevenfold nature of man and cosmos, seeing the great tree as an archetype of correspondence between the macrocosm and the microcosm. We are told that Krishna, the Lord of the universe, can be called the rootless root, because he is the eternal, unmanifest cause. The Prakriti, the light of Logos, is that energy which sustains the whole universe, invisible yet omnipresent. The branches and the roots which ramify in the region of mankind represent the lower nature, the field of conditioned existence, all bases of matter. So here the upper unseen roots correspond to the divine radiance that emanates from the Logos. The lower branches and the secondary roots denote the substance or the basis of differentiation. The same dual polarity exists within every human being. The higher triad, the Atma, Buddhi, Manas, reflects the light of the upper roots, while the lower quaternary, also known as Kama, Prana, Linga Sarira, and Sthula Sarira, spreads below into the field of action and desire. And it is stated that the heavenly invisible roots in the tree are man's higher nature, his spiritual will and intuition, from which from those invisible roots spring forth the branches and the roots below, which symbolize the personality in man, his passions and his senses, ever seeking nourishment in the soil of experience. Thus, the Ashwatha is not only the map of the cosmos, but the map of the self. Every human life reenacts the same descent from spirit into form and the same potential ascent back towards the root. The task of self-knowledge is to recognize this parallel and to live consciously at the junction, the trunk, where the divine sap flows into the world. Mr. Judge alludes to this inner structure when he writes that the spirit in man is the upper root and the personality the lower root. When these are united in understanding, the tree stands firm, but when divided by ignorance, it falls into decay. The ethical implication is clear. Every thought and act either nourishes the upward flow or reinforces the downward pull. When consciousness turns outward, it feeds the branches of desire. When it turns inward, it strengthens the root of being. Therefore, the macrocosm is not external to us. The term roots above, exist in the very center of consciousness, while the roots below, the branches below, are the projections of that consciousness into the planes of sensation and action. The mystic's ascent of the tree is the process of living the inner life, retracing the sap to its source. And as it was said previously, he who would understand the tree must himself become the root, for the knowledge of the whole lies hidden in the seed. In the Gita, the 15th chapter, the Ashwatta tree's leaves are said to be the Vedas. And precisely what he says is leaves are the Vedas. This identification is full of theosophical teaching. As leaves draw nourishment from the sap within and transform light into life, so sacred texts draw vitality from the hidden wisdom of spirit and transform it into the language of thought. And yet, just as the leaves may wither and fall when they no longer transmit the sap, so do scriptures lose their living force when they become mere objects of ritual and dogma. And so the Ashwatta teaches the student of theosophy to distinguish between the outer form of religion and its inner essence. And further, it is said that the leaves are the Vedas, meaning the various forms of revealed knowledge. The Karma Kanda, or the ritual portion, is like the green foliage that keeps one entangled in the world of sense. While the Upanishads, the knowledge Kanda, are like the leaves turned toward the light of heaven, through which one passes beyond the material world. And these few lines kind of summarize the entire tension between the exoteric and the esoteric religion. The leaf is indispensable, it shelters and nourishes, but it must remain translucent to the light. When doctrine obscures rather than reveals, the leaf thickens and the branch darkens. Knowledge becomes superstition. The Gita's teaching, therefore, does not reject the Vedas, but rather places them within the larger context of the trees. They are the means, not the end. And Mr. Judge notes, the sacred hymns are the expressions of divine wisdom in sound, but when they're repeated without understanding, they cling to the lower air of the tree and do not reach the root. Thus, repetition without realization is like rote learning without assimilation. Theosophy also interprets this allegory from the ethical standpoint. It states that the leaves of doctrine are the formulated thoughts of sages, each one's a living intuition, now codified for the use of disciples. To quote-unquote eat those leaves is to study, but to digest them is to practice. As is told, the study of the scriptures should be accompanied by meditation upon the spirit. Only thus does the leaf remain green, for its life is drawn from the unseen sap of the root. Therefore, true discipleship is a kind of photosynthesis. The mind turns towards the inner sun, absorbing life, transmuting it into moral and spiritual energy, and giving back nourishment to the world. The illusion arises when the aspirant mistakes the leaf for the whole tree, when textual mastery replaces direct realization. In other words, when intellect replaces intuition. Krishna warns Arjuna that the Vedas themselves are within Prakriti, the field of becoming, but the yogin must transcend even sacred learning to reach the imperishable. Hence, the heart doctrine does not deny the Vedas, but rather fulfills them by leading the soul from words of wisdom, from symbol to source. When knowledge becomes self-knowledge, the leaf and the sap are one. The Bhagavad Gita portrays the tree as also as firmly rooted below in the world of men, whose secondary roots bind the soul through attachment and delusion. These downward trending roots symbolize the entangling tendencies of the lower nature, those instinctive growths of desire and habit that draw nourishment from the soul of sense. In theosophical teaching, these are the psychic accretions that obscure the radiance of the higher self, forming what we know as Kamarupa, the desire part of man. Further, these tamasic roots may be thought of as the possessive nature of man, which sends forth innumerable feelers into the dark earth of self-interest. They are roots indeed hard to dislodge, for they draw the strength from ignorance. However, one has to cut the tree with the axe of secret wisdom, that is, with discrimination and detachment, severing the trunk which represent egotism. So here, the word tamasic represents a quality that holds consciousness captive in dullness and fear. And the secondary roots feel upon this darkness, just as the real roots burrow into soil. The deeper they go, the more the tree of personality thrives in the material realm. The imagery of the axe appears both in the Gita and Mr. Judge's commentary. The axe is knowledge, or gnana, sharpened by detachment, viraga. Mr. Judge writes that the axe of secret wisdom is no weapon forged of anger or denial. It is discernment, by which the soul distinguishes the eternal from the ephemeral or impermanent. When this axe is applied, the trunk of egotism falls, and the being, freed from bondage, ascends to the upper root. This cutting is therefore not destruction but liberation, the release of the upward moving current of consciousness that has long been trapped in a downward growth of the craving of root. The act of cutting in theosophical parlance therefore corresponds to renunciation in daily life. It is the courageous refusal to identify with the personality while still using it as a field of service. The Ashwatta cannot be felled by violence. Only understanding dissolves the delusion of separateness. As is quoted, one must lift the axe inwardly in silent meditation, where one alone the root of ego can be found. The tamasic roots are also collective, that is, civilization itself is an outgrowth of the desire to possess and to dominate. The aspirant's inner work becomes a microcosmic act of cosmic redemption. Each dislodged root of personal ignorance weakens the bondage of humanity as a whole. And therefore, the term cut the tree is thus to invert evolution, to redirect the current of life toward its divine source. In the instant of cutting, the Ashwatta ceases to be the tree of bondage and becomes a tree of liberation. If the Ashwatta is impermanent and is out of form, it is indestructible in essence. Beneath the ebb and the flow of birth and decay, there flows an unbroken current of being, a respiration which Gita calls a Mahaprana and which Theosophy terms as a great breath. The breath is not a metaphor but a description of the rhythmic alternation of manifestation and repose. Universes come forth and withdraw like the inhalations and exhalations of the eternal life. Mr. Judge gives a very clear expression of these principles, and he says that it is an eternal evolutionary stream proceeding from a changeless source, symbolized as a great breath. When the breath goes forth, worlds appear. When it is indrawn, they disappear. The sum total of causation of the previous universe becomes a seed for the succeeding one. And here the Ashwatta stands as a visible diagram of that breathing, its periodic flowering and shedding of leaves, its ceaseless renewal, and its rootedness in the unseen. Every moment of time is a pulse in the respiration, and every soul like an eddy in the current. The tree, though described as impermanent, is at the same time called avyavya, indestructible, because the stream of life within it never ceases. Forms appear and vanish, yet the flow endures, and it is the same eternal motion that we call the great breath of the one life. And this is a quote from one of the Theosophical movement articles. This statement reconciles change and permanence. The transience of phenomena is not chaos, but order, the order of rhythm. Birth and death are alternating phases of one life process, an endless sequence of manifestation and returning into rest. In human terms, the great breath is a rhythm of consciousness itself, waking and sleeping, incarnation and withdrawal, activity and contemplation. And to live in harmony with the rhythm is the secret of balance. And therefore, the aspirant who breathes in unison with the universe learns to act without anxiety and to rest without inertia. And as Mr. Judd says, those who perceive the breath know that destruction is only transformation. For them, the tree of life has no death, only a ceaseless renewal of form. Hence, the sage does not grieve when the leaves fall, nor rejoice when they appear. Seeing the one life in all, he moves with rhythm of the great breath, neither clinging or resisting. And therefore, the Ashwatta becomes then the image of serene activity, motion rooted in stillness, impermanence sustained by eternity. The great breath is therefore the metaphysical heart of the Ashwatta doctrine. It unites cosmology, psychology, and ethics in one single principle of pulsation. To know it is to share the divine respiration, to feel within one's own being the rise and fall of the cosmic tide. And as the article states, the breath of one life passes through all beings. When we breathe in harmony with it, the tree within us becomes immortal. Now, within this symbolism of Ashwatta, Theosophy recognizes not only a cosmic allegory, but also a sacred lineage of teachers and initiates. The Bhagavad Gita's inverted tree, reflected in the mirror of manifestation, becomes in occult interpretation the great banyan, the tree of life and of knowledge, under whose shade the hierarchy of compassionate works for humanity. The banyan stands for the ever-living change of spiritual instruction, linking the highest adepts to the humblest disciple. And here we are told that a banyan tree is called both the tree of knowledge and the tree of life. From its unseen roots spring its mighty trunk that sends down aerial roots to form new stems. So is the brotherhood of adepts, the ever-living human banyan, under whose branches humanity finds shelter. The ancient tree teachers draw the sustenance from the invisible root and in turn become roots and stem for others. The metaphor perfectly conveys a theosophical conception of initiation. Each teacher, having realized unity within the root, becomes a channel through which the light of consciousness flows into the world. Every true disciple who awakens the light within himself extends the tree further into manifestation. This ever-living human banyan is the source of all spiritual instruction. Its leaves, the myriad students who draw life from the teaching, it sap the universal compassion which flows silently from the heart of the Master. In this image, we see initiation not as a ceremony, but as a participation in a living current. The teacher does not confer enlightenment. He connects the student to the root, awakening memory of what is already within. Process of initiation is therefore an interior recognition of the divine ancestry of consciousness. And HPB in the secret doctrine used the same imagery when she referred to the ever-living banyan as a symbol of the great lodge of the white adepts. Under the direct silent guidance of this Mahaguru, she wrote, "New shoots are continually sent out, each in its own time destined to take root and grow into a beneficent tree." The banyan is both a botanical reality and a hierophant emblem of transmission. Its aerial roots are the descending lines of grace. Its spreading canopy is the protection of wisdom. From the standpoint of discipleship, the ever-living quality of the tree lies in its impersonality. No single teacher or school or organization can claim ownership of it. It is a living manifestation of the timeless Guru Parampara, a spiritual succession that exists wherever wisdom is transmuted without self-interest. As long as compassion and knowledge circulate in the world, the banyan lives. And therefore, to approach this tree is to stand within the current of the great breath itself, to recognize that initiation is not an event in time, but a continuous flowering of consciousness. All that proceeds in this Ashwatta teaching, its roots, branches, and leaves, finds its consummation in practice. Knowledge without devotion is barren, and devotion without knowledge is blind. The union of these two, expressed through selfless service, constitutes living worship of the tree's root. In the Theosophical synthesis, this triad discipline corresponds to wisdom, love, and action, also known as Gnana Yoga, the Bhakti Yoga, and Karma Yoga, each nourishing and purifying the others. And Mr. Judge aptly referred to the Gita as a study of the adepts, because it reveals the method by which the inner self is awakened through right performance of action and the right orientation of the mind. The study of the Bhagavad Gita is itself a form of yoga, he wrote, for it unites the intellect with the intuition and the will with the heart. The purpose of all this philosophy is therefore practical. It is to transform the reader from a thinker into a doer of the divine will. Every act of understanding becomes a leaf of devotion, and every act of service a branch of knowledge. Further, it's taught that a higher self is invoked by sincere and devoted disciples who endeavor to center their lives upon moral refinement, self-control, self-knowledge, and service. The Gita, if rightly understood, is a guide to daily living. It shows how the heart and the mind together may worship the one life. Hence, the worship of Ashwatta is not confined to meditation or ritual. It is a silent reverence of pure motive, the offering of thought and deed at the altar of duty. Bhavani Shankar, in one of his essays, deepens his understanding by revealing the secret inner bhakti. He says, "Worship me with all the bhavas means with all states of consciousness, which is intellectual, emotional, and volitional. Each must be transformed into a channel for the divine. When the heart loves, the mind contemplates, and the will serves, then the whole man becomes an instrument of worship." And this, at least in our understanding, is the culmination of the Ashwatta doctrine, the complete coordination of human nature with divine purpose. Devotion here is not sentiment, but the constant remembrance of the self in all. Knowledge becomes root, devotion the sap, and the service the fruit. And finally, the Ashwatta therefore stands firmly and immovably as a symbol of right living. To contemplate it is to hold the diagram of one's own inner work. Its root above remind the aspirant that he is a ray of the Supreme. Its branches below teach him that he lives amidst the flux of karma and must act there unselfishly. And to quote unquote cut the tree is not to destroy life, but to transcend illusion, to perceive that the same life runs through root, trunk, and leaf. When devotion, knowledge, and service are united, the pilgrim no longer stands beneath the tree as a seer. He becomes a tree itself, an embodiment of the one life, shading the world with compassion. And with that, we'll open up for questions, feedback, contributions. Thank you.
Thank you. Gave us a lot to think about.
Yeah, so for this short presentation, the source was the Gita, some articles in Theosophical movement, and secret doctrines. Not a whole lot is really. The term Ashwatta is mentioned on and off, as you probably all of you have noticed, but only a few articles really bring out the symbolism or the various forms of symbolism. We saw it symbolizes, and it has a philosophical symbolism as the wisdom symbolism, and also a symbolism of hierarchy of masters and disciples. So.
Yeah, there's not a lot. You have to like pick it from here or there where it's mentioned. And you've put it together amazing collection of thoughts and knowledge. It almost sounds like man is the Ashwatta tree on one level.
Yeah, so at least this student's understanding is the fully awakened man is Ashwatta, the true Ashwatta tree itself, a reflection of the macrocosm. In many ways, reflection is in many ways Ashwatta tree aligns beautifully with the three fundamentals, and so and at least this student's understanding is to truly become quote unquote or retrace yourself to the full Ashwatta tree is to be fully awakened. And in a different way, the light, the voice of silence says that we have to become the path itself. So we could say metaphorically, the Ashwatta tree is a path itself. Different ways of looking at it.
If the fully enlightened human being, I'm thinking of the roots that are always in the, let's say, upper realm, in the realm of, the absolute, the Atma, complete knowledge. We just have to access the roots. We're like, they're a part of us. We just feel they're not active. We're cut off from them.
Yeah, so the upper roots basically represent higher consciousness, and what we're taught, as Mr. Judd says, is to start. The first step is start drawing attention to higher thought, higher living, and there's a nice metaphor here which talks about the flowing of the sap in the trunk, the consciousness. It can also be regarded as flowing of spiritual energy, and I think the voice of silence says something similar, where we should try to stop the energy to flowing downward into the ocean of what the term uses, passions and desires, and reverse the flow of energy upward. Again, through, in practical terms, study, meditation. Every time we pick up even a verse of the voice of silence or any devotional book, and for that point in time, we are partaking in higher consciousness. We so to speak, diverting attention to the higher roots of the tree.
And you said the teacher connects the students to the root.
And the teacher connects to the root. Yes. The teacher can only cannot, the student has to do it for himself or herself.
Mm-hmm. How does understanding the Ashwatta tree help us understand karma and rebirth? Is it that like the seasons, the tree, the tree is active in manifestation during the springtime, during a period of manifestation, during a period of rebirth?
So the tree itself, as you may have noticed, that it's a symbolism at multiple levels. It's the leaves falling and then being replaced by new leaves can represent renewal, the cycle of life and death. The leaf disappearing and reappearing can be when the knowledge itself loses its true inner value and becomes ritual and dogmatism, and it falls off and gets renewed again. So the leaves, so leaves can represent the cyclical nature of at our level as well as the highest level, the great breath.
I have a question.
Yeah.
You had said, I think near the beginning, every thought either strengthens the connection to the higher nature or strengthens the lower nature. It made me wonder if it's that polarized. Are there no neutral thoughts? Is there no gradation in there? Is it really that every thought can be attributed to one or the other?
That's a great question. At least from this student's understanding, that at least at our stage, every thought is dual in nature. And you're right, if at some point when the thought becomes one with universal and stays there continuously, that's full awakening. At that point, we cannot say it's higher or lower. I think you go beyond the dual nature, and that's in many ways one of the main goals of fully awakening. So again, this student's conjecture is, while we are in this embodied form, either our minds are dual, the lower and higher manas, and they reflect lower and higher thoughts. So thought itself, in a pure form, can be just higher thought, or thought itself, when indulging in in all the lower desires and passions, can be lower. But it's really I think for most of us, it's dual. I think it's the some may be completely immersed in lower. I think that can be, but for most of us, since our minds are dual, we can only assume that our thoughts are dual as well.
Like, I think it was Gandhi said, you either sink or swim.
You either sink or swim, exactly. You put it beautifully, yes.
But just along that thought, if I can add something, we can chop down the tree with detachment. So maybe the thought, depending on, the motive and the level of attachment, would affect what we were just speaking of.
And that's really good.
Neutrality.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because as the student was trying to study whatever limited information is there, it seems as though Ashwatta itself has different forms, right? It has, it can be, like you said, hewn down with compassion. The roots at that point, the leaves represent the lower nature, right? But the leaves can also represent Vedas and higher knowledge itself. So it is, and it's entirely possible that the Ashwatta tree, from our point in current evolution, is different from, say, a disciple at a much higher advancement may see it very differently. So at this stage, It's at least from Mr. Judge's notes that you start off by turning your consciousness towards higher roots. That's the first step. And sustaining that both in meditation and action. And it could be that maybe in a future life, if we sustain that level of meditation, we may come to view the Ashwatta tree in a kind of different light than what we perceive at this point.
You can see why it's such a potent symbol.
What seems unique about the Ashwatta symbol is that inversion of the roots and the leaves, because the same symbol exists in, like, there's the world tree of the Celtics, and there's the Yggdrasil of the Norse, and they don't talk about that inversion. So this is like, it's like a really universal metaphor, but in this specific context, it's actually quite unique.
Yeah, the tree itself is symbol in so many philosophies, right? I mean, we're told that Buddha gained enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. Metaphorically, it's Buddhi, right? And that's a different way. So tree itself is such an enormous symbol at multiple levels. And Ashwatta is probably a more universal because it's been used as a symbol at multiple different levels, right? Philosophy and levels of the whole hierarchy of beings, right? Starting from the highest archangels down to maybe just aspiring students like us. So maybe it's more universal, but the tree itself, if you just pull up the Secret Doctrine and just search tree or any of this, you'll see multiple levels of. And you read the Celtic itself; it's beautifully symbol is putting beautifully in that way too. So yeah.
Yeah, and I'm reminded of the symbol that's often rendered as like a knotwork pattern. The roots are very often, it's all very symmetrical and beautifully rendered, but they often wind into the branches.
Yes.
And kind of completes the circle that way.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Again, it took the students several weeks to really get a decent grasp because of it turned out to be much larger than what I thought it would be, study, because it seems, like I said, it is a symbol of the whole cosmos at different levels. And, we can only grasp what we can. So.
Right. It seems like if you had no Secret Doctrine, no Bhagavad Gita, no Voice of the Silence, no fill in the blank devotional book, but you had a tree.
Yeah.
You could discern the nature of all these things just by meditating upon the symbolism of the tree.
Absolutely.
It's so potent.
And you put it beautifully. The leaves, at the purest level can be the different books, the Gita and the Voice of Silence, the Mahaprana. They can be the leaves. Yeah, you're right. It stands comprehensively as wisdom itself. So.
Right. I think it's how sages and hermits and the all the people from the past that you think of, that there was no printing press, there was no physical paper for books, there may not even have been schools or even an oral tradition. They just really rustic sort of for generations, whole civilizations really, and yet the wisdom was as present and potent then as it is now.
Yeah. In many ways, we are retracing our steps, and we are circling back to our source so we can better understand this tree.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about that in relation to the detachment. Like if an enlightened being came into this realm, or you could use the analogy of a visitor from another planet. They might just observe but not be moved, just,
Mhm.
completely detached. And in a sense, we have to regain that sort of
Mhm.
point of view that, because you said the acts of detachment is what
Mhm.
cuts down the tree in the realm of manifestation, so that we can descend to the roots, or we no longer need we want to cut it off, so we can't return to the part of the tree that represents the lower nature, make that separation. How to return to that detachment. We already know it because we came from it. It's a matter of
Mhm. Yes.
regaining that.
I know we're a couple minutes over. I do have another question. Though. Should we end or?
No, go ahead.
That's fine. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. You said another interesting thing. It's just got my mind spinning. You said, I think, transience of phenomena is not chaos. And I thought that was almost the definition of chaos. So now I'm thinking, if that's not chaos, what is chaos? Is there such a thing as chaos? And did I quote you right? If I did, if I didn't, I
Yeah.
apologize.
Yeah. So yeah, I recall reading that too in the articles. And what these students' understanding is that in its deepest sense, everything is transient, right? I mean, even the whole manvantaric, as it reabsorbs once it's done, is transient, and that is not something that is accidental or at random. And so, from that viewpoint, that's my understanding. Is true understanding of even though theosophy, we talk so much about the transitory nature of, we don't fully grasp it. We have to be, most of us don't. Some do probably, and that's the connection that this student at least understanding is that everything is transitory, but in a very uniform manner, and not chaotic and not random and not as a coincidence.
I see.
That's from that angle.
That makes sense. So the transitory nature of things is part of the natural order.
Natural order, and also a reflection that everything is a motion, continuous motion. So,
Right. Does that mean then there really isn't any such thing as chaos?
at least, it depends how you define chaos, right? I mean, so the layman understanding of chaos is something that's a multitude of random processes intersecting each other, right? But from everything at least from our study of what's given out in Theosophy, that's not the case. That there is an underlying stream of logic and reasoning in every process, right? It's just hard to reconcile the two when we talk about, when physicists talk about chaos. But even then, if you maybe they even then, but they have a mathematical way of deriving that. So it can't be true chaos. It has to be some, there's a logic there. So it's maybe chaos is not as as we all of us think. Even we theosophical students, when you get into a discussion, we talk about chaos. The whole image of random things occurring at the same time. But it seems as though even for physicists, mathematically, they're able to get to that.
Yeah, even I recall there's some passage, I think it's maybe in Light of Asia or just in the historical canon, that the Buddha was able to determine, like, the beating of a gnat's wing or something, like had this ultimate precise understanding and knowledge. Maybe chaos is just an apparent thing, that it's actually a representation of our ignorance, that if we could trace it all back to causes, the original cause of all these things, we could see the cause and the effect and all that. And so chaos and maybe just our ignorance of the ultimate order of it all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead, Kathy.
Sorry. I was going to say, but you had mentioned that every enlightened being sheds light into this world.
Mhm.
That is not random, is not chaotic.
Mhm.
That is true. It's interesting in with your analogy of the tree and its roots and above, and the whole photosynthesis, the discipleship is like analogous to the process of photosynthesis, absorbing that light.
Yeah, I think Mr. Judge, either Judge or Crosby say, right, that many of the sages are taught themselves to look at the sun from um, from an occult standpoint and gain its energy from that. So
The process is not chaotic. It feels
yeah,
chaotic,
yeah,
but it's got an
exactly.
inherent logic, like you were saying.
Yeah, and Josh put it beautifully. It's cause and effect. I think that's something we should learn and teach everybody. Everything is cause and effect, even at the highest level.
Mm.
Yeah, I'm reminded of the three body problem,
Mhm.
right, where you have three celestial objects, gravitational forces. We cannot predict where they're going to go, what they're going to be. Like our math isn't good enough. So it appears like chaos. If we know the positions of those three objects, those three bodies, prior to them being set into motion, we can predict it. But if we just know it from its current state, there's no way, we still don't have a way mathematically to predict the orbital dynamics of three objects in motion around each other.
Absolutely. And maybe that's why, the paradox of organized chaos has come across. It's maybe an intuitive understanding that things do line up, but till we reach that point, things do seem random or coincidental or chaotic. So,
Yeah, fascinating.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much for a wonderful talk. I'm going to stop recording now, but we hope anybody who watches the video has a comment or a thought or a question to put it below, and we'll get back to you and consider it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.